All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Lock Up Shutdown podcast. My name's Monica. Joining me, as always, is my good friend Zach. How's it going tonight?
It's going great. It finally hit me this week that we're actually coming up to the end of the NFL season as we look more and more at the playoff situation, which seems crazy to me just because it feels like last week we were starting week one of this and looking into who might be the good and bad teams this season, and now we're debating about who's gonna make it and not make it into the playoffs and everything else. So
Absolutely.
Quick and finally hit me this week.
Absolutely. It certainly feels like the Super Bowl is just going to be next week, for all we know. But we definitely know that it's not going to be this week. And I don't think your hiccups are going to go away any point this week. But today, we'll talk about what current player is the most important to the success of their franchise. You determine if the Baltimore Ravens can get themselves out of a downward spiral to end the year. And maybe this time, we won't forget to talk about the Colts as a potential dark horse going into the playoffs. But first, as always, it's our biggest surprise from the week behind. Zach, why don't you get us rolling?
Yep, my surprise is actually going to come from the Kansas City Chiefs and Las Vegas Raiders. When you say the Chiefs are going to score 48 points, you usually think, all right, Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill are going to torch a few people, or maybe Travis Kelce might get a few touchdowns. But when you look at it, Patrick Mahomes has 2 passing touchdowns. Tyreek Hill has 76 yards and no touchdowns. Travis Kelce has 27 yards and no touchdowns. So I think the way the Chiefs beat the Raiders surprised me the most, beating them by 39 and forcing 5 turnovers. Vegas losing 4 fumbles, as well as an interception from Derek Carr, I think was the biggest surprise for me. I think we've known the Chiefs are a good team after their slow start to the season, but I didn't expect them to, beat the Raiders by 39, but especially if you told me the way they would beat them by 39 would shock me even more.
I had a bit of a different approach to my biggest surprise this week, because my biggest surprise was the 49ers beating the Bengals 26-23 in overtime. The teams didn't seem all too fairly matched as we went into the game. Obviously, they were both pretty even on the season, but there was still a 1 to 2 game gap between the two. Now there is not a gap between the two in terms of record. Statistically, the Bengals seemed better in the game. Joe Burrow was 25 for 34 with 348 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions. Jimmy G put up similar numbers, but less yards, less completion percentage, with 27 completions, 41 attempts, 296 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions. Jimmy G's second touchdown came in overtime to win the game after the Bengals were held to just a field goal. Despite everything that's happened this season, to my absolute surprise, the Ravens are still in first place in the AFC North for yet another week. Everything seems to be going really wonky in the AFC North, and this is why both of us agreed that these teams were the ones to watch.
Yep, the AFC North is giving you something new every single week, it feels like, when the Steelers are down by 29 to the Vikings and then have a chance to win it on the final play of the game, and then you got the Bengals losing to the Niners and the Ravens trying to make a crazy comeback of their own against the Browns as well. And at the end of the week, you get multiple teams in the AFC to get favorable results if you're a Ravens fan, and there you are, still sitting atop the division as the season winds down. So we'll see what transpires in the next couple weeks, and maybe the Ravens can shock the world and win their division.
Well, I know one team that won't be leading their division this season, or for that matter anytime soon, and that's the Jacksonville Jaguars. Trevor Lawrence had himself a rough game on Sunday, so do we think that Trevor Lawrence's 4-interception performance signifies a long stretch of more suffering to come for all you Jags fans out there? Why don't you start us off, Zach?
I think there's going to be a lot of suffering to come for the Jags in the next couple of years, but I don't think Trevor Lawrence is going to be the main reason for that suffering. I think the biggest reason so far this season is got to lay on Urban Meyer. He's been I don't want to call him a disgrace of a coach, but he's been near a disgrace of a coach so far in the NFL, and I think it finally came to the forefront this week with all the pre-game issues that they had leading up to the game on Sunday, and then everything else that happened on Sunday finally showed that what everyone thinks Urban Meyer is exactly what he is, and that the Jags aren't getting any better than they were in the beginning of the season, and that whether it's James Robinson wanting to not play for Urban Meyer or Marvin Jones Jr. not wanting to play for Urban Meyer, even his assistant coaches not wanting to work for him anymore. I think everything points back to one main reason, and I think that is that Urban Meyer is the biggest issue for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And yes, Trevor Lawrence had maybe his worst game of his career so far, but I'm more worried about Urban Meyer's longevity with the Jaguars over how much Trevor Lawrence is going to do in his time with the Jags.
I think I have to disagree. You know, maybe we've just been spoiled by talented rookies like Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow last year or Mac Jones this year, but I think there's a bit to be worried about when it comes to Trevor Lawrence in particular. The Jags have very talented weapons on their team. Like you said, James Robinson, Marvin Jones is a very, very solid veteran. They have got DJ Chark. They've got a lot of weapons surrounding Lawrence, and despite the awful coaching from Urban Meyer, Trevor Lawrence just hasn't seemed to be able to do anything to even slightly get around Urban Meyer's bad coaching. There's nothing going right for the Jags, and Trevor Lawrence is probably one of them. I mean, even Gardner Minshew last year created a lot of Minshew mania moments, but we have yet to see any of that when it comes to Trevor Lawrence. So far in the year, he has 2,700 passing yards, 9 touchdowns, and 14 interceptions, and an absolutely atrocious 32 quarterback rating on the year, where Zach Wilson is criticized despite his semi-successful time with the New York Jets. Obviously not great, but he showed some promise, even despite how awful the talent is around him, how awful the coaching is when it comes to the New York Jets. Everything is wrong with the Jets, and yet Zach Wilson is still showing promise. Trevor Lawrence, on the other hand, hasn't shown any of that, and I'm a little bit worried about how Trevor Lawrence is going to be for the future of the Jacksonville Jaguars franchise.
Yeah, I'm not saying Trevor Lawrence is good, but I don't think he's the biggest issue that the Jags need to be worried about right now, because I think when you were talking about Minshew Mania, those teams actually enjoyed playing with each other and enjoyed going to practice, which makes it a little bit easier and you can get better that way. When you got Marvin Jones, who has to be called by coaches on his phone to convince him to even come back to the training facility once he left because he was so mad at Urban Meyer, I don't think that's a good situation. And I think with James Robinson only getting 6 rushes when he's your best player on the team, just shows how many issues they may have inside this locker room, clubhouse, organization, whatever you want to call it. There are multiple issues in there, and I don't think, even if you had Dak Prescott or Josh Allen, an actual good quarterback, I don't think they're going to be as good as they could be just because there's so many other issues.
I certainly think there's a lot to be worried about if you're a Jags fan, and maybe Trevor Lawrence is one of them, but certainly Urban Meyer is one of them, that's for sure. Let's talk about a very interesting question that you brought to me earlier this week, which is simply stated as, what player currently in the NFL is the most vital to the success of their team currently? Zach, as always, you can start us off.
Gonna go a little bit basic on this one, but gotta go with Tom Brady. is the most important player to his current team. I don't even think I have to say much, but all the accolades that Tom Brady has had, you saw the first year after the Patriots, once they lost Tom Brady and the struggles that they had, and then everything that the Bucs have done since then with Tom Brady now having potentially the best record in the league after Monday Night Football. I think you got to go and say that Tom Brady's the most important player to his franchise. I think it's in almost every situation, not every team, but most teams, their quarterback is going to be the most valuable piece to their franchise, and I think that's the case with the Bucs, as they have not only the most important player to the franchise in the league right now, but I think the best player to ever play in the NFL, especially still at age 44, showing how talented he is. You even saw him rushing a few times this weekend. So I'm going to say that Tom Brady is the most important player to his given team in the NFL right now.
I have to agree with you on your point that a quarterback is certainly the most important player on any given team in any given franchise. However, I have to disagree with you on who the most important is. Tom Brady obviously is a very great player, but I think you could put any good quarterback in there and they'd probably be doing the same thing. If Aaron Rodgers were a Buccaneer right now, they'd be on their way to a Super Bowl too. Let's be real. I think that the answer comes not from a team that's doing terribly successful right now, but rather comes from the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson, and I think you were probably expecting this one out of me. Lamar Jackson has completely carried the Ravens since his first start over Joe Flacco back in 2018. Despite the lack of good play call from Greg Roman and the lack of talent surrounding him, Lamar has yet to miss the playoffs, had the only unanimous MVP season ever, and has carried this brittle-boned team to 8 wins already this season. Lamar Jackson is by far, out of any given player in the league, is the most important to his given team. He's just the absolute best player on the Ravens, and one of the better players in the league. This guy has been carrying the team on his back for his entire career at this point, and it's safe to say that he's going to continue to do so.
Yeah, I think Lamar has definitely been the key piece that's held the Ravens together. They've had plenty of mix and match going on both this season and previous seasons with all the injuries that they've had within their team. I think they're on their 5th or 6th or 7th running back right now, it seems, this season, after losing J.K. Dobbins and almost every other running back. And I mean, right now it's Devontae Freeman and Latavius Murray, but one of the key reasons I didn't go with Lamar Jackson, one, I thought you were going to pick him, but 2, I think to say the player's most important for his team, yet they still almost won this week without him, seems sort of contradictory of yourself after you see Tyler Huntley throw for 270 yards and a touchdown, leading the Ravens back from a 24-6 halftime deficit to 24-22, and maybe 40 yards away from getting a win for the Ravens. I think Lamar Jackson's one of the most important, but not the most important.
I think that the difference between Tyler Huntley and Lamar Jackson on this team is that one player can almost make a comeback. The other player most definitely would have made a comeback and would have won the game had he not been injured. Ultimately, I think that was the key difference between the two players, and ultimately finishing out a game is the most important thing when it comes to any given quarterback, which is what makes Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady so great, is that they can finish a game rather than just start one out. Let's talk about a team that needs to start finishing their season strong. It's the Indianapolis Colts, who we will most definitely not forget to talk about this week like we did last week. I didn't realize we had missed it until our editor Noah had made a comment saying that we completely forgot the segment, and so Let's talk about the Indianapolis Colts. Do we think that the Colts are a dark horse to make a run in the playoffs? Earlier this year, we predicted the Chargers and the Washington football team as this season's dark horse teams. I think that the Colts most definitely could be a sneaky team that could most definitely be a dark horse into the playoffs. The Colts are currently 7-6. They have a tough schedule ahead with the Pats, Cardinals, and Raiders involved on that schedule. They're 13th in the league in yards allowed and 10th in points allowed, 11th in yards per game and 5th in points per game. They have one of the better. They're at least a top 10 team in the league for sure. I think that this team has a small chance to push at the AFC Championship. However, I get that we're calling them a dark horse here, but honestly, I think that they're going to be a divisional round or even a first round exit going into this season. They do have a very small chance of going into the AFC Championship. I won't deny them that.
Yeah, the Colts have been a unique team, I would say. Been up and down most of the season, but I know we're just talking about how important it is to finish games out, but got to give the Colts the credit that they've at least been in a spot to win almost every game the entire season. You lose to the Rams by 3, you lose to the Ravens in overtime, you lose to the Titans in overtime, you lose to the Bucks on a last-second touchdown. So I think with the 6 losses, there's 4 of them right there that have come within the last minute of the game. And I think once you get into the playoffs where it's win or go home, you could see them pull out just 3 or 4 wins and all of a sudden you're in the Super Bowl. So with the ground game that they have and Jonathan Taylor, we've seen how important that is with the Derrick Henry carrying the Titans and Lamar Jackson carrying the Ravens in recent years. I think that's one of the most important pieces is to have a great running back, and they have that with Jonathan Taylor as well as Michael Pittman and Zach Pascal out wide. So I think the Colts got a chance, and you said it, they're such a dark horse that we forgot about them ourselves last week, but I don't think anyone's going to forget about them in the playoffs, and I think they're one of the teams that those top seeds like the Patriots and Titans and Chiefs may want to avoid in that first round, as they know there'll be a hard exit.
Absolutely. Let's talk about a team that's definitely not making the playoffs this year, despite all their past successes. It's the Seattle Seahawks, who have been having a very, very bad season so far. I believe only 3 or 4 wins on the year, or something like that. Regardless, let's talk about the rebuild that the Seahawks are going to need to get back to the days of their league-wide dominance. What do you think the Seahawks need?
I think they're going to need just a reset button and one to get healthy with the players they have this year. But then heading into next year, I think to just improve on that defense. They've got the quarterback in Russell Wilson. They've got the running back with Chris Carson, who's unfortunately only played 4 games this season. And then you got at least the top 2 receivers with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, who seem to just swap who's going to go off in what game. But when we talk about the old Seahawks, you got the Legion of Boom defense that just seems to not be there right now. You got Bobby Wagner and maybe Jamal Adams, but besides that, there's not too many pieces that you can count on for the Seahawks week in, week out for them to have. So I think once you get the defense and go back to the saying of defense wins championships, that's what will propel the Seahawks back into the competitiveness of their division. But again, I think they're hurt by the NFC West just having so many good teams with the Cardinals, Rams, Niners, and then the Seahawks themselves.
I think they definitely need to hit the reset button, but I think they need to hit it a little bit harder than you've described. Despite how good Pete Carroll is as a coach, He's a great coach. He's done a great job so far in his tenure. However, I think it's time for the Seahawks to make a move and move on to try and change the culture this season. The defense and their O-line have been absolutely terrible for multiple years, and they definitely need to start working on those as their first building blocks. Their offensive line can't protect a quarterback for the life of them. Their defense can't stop an offense for the life of them. Like you said, the defense definitely needs to start returning to that Legion of Boom defense wins championships mentality. I think it could very well be strategic for the Seahawks if they committed to the rebuild to the point of trading away Russell Wilson at some point in the next few years. Perhaps during a year when the quarterback draft class is stronger, unlike what it currently is this year. Maybe we'll see some generational talent in the NCAA that ultimately will end up being Russell Wilson's replacement. I think that he needs to succeed in a different franchise outright.
Yeah, I know Russell Wilson's had his ups and downs in his career, and obviously this year would not be one of his best years, but I don't think it's time for him to get out of Seattle just yet. I'll give him at least one more year, and maybe if we get 2 seasons on the run of him not being up to the standard he's been at, maybe you look at a replacement. But especially with this year's weak draft class at the quarterback position, I don't want to go and make a move and get rid of Russell Wilson. Especially, you say number one job for the quarterback is to not make any mistakes and keep you in the game. And yeah, Russell Wilson may not have those explosive plays, but he's not gonna have those mistakes that you say. He was only throwing 4 interceptions the entire season, which is tied for the fewest interceptions in the league between starting quarterbacks. So I'm gonna give him one more year, not give up on him just yet, but it is in that time where you need to look at other places, see what you could bring into the franchise if you're the GM.
The Seahawks certainly don't need to start worrying about anything this season, but definitely need to start worrying about things in the offseason. There's one team that can't afford to wait until the offseason to start turning things around. It's the Baltimore Ravens, who we've talked about a few times so far already in this episode, but we'll talk about them once again. Do we think that the Baltimore Ravens can turn things around before the end of the season? Why don't you start us off with this one, Zach?
I don't think the Ravens are going to be able to turn it around this season. They could maybe win one game in the playoffs, but I'm not setting their potential any higher than a 1-win playoff team. And I think we talked about how good they've been in keeping that first place spot in the division, but I think that's finally gonna come to an end here soon. After their next 3 games are the Packers, the Bengals, and the Rams, and then after that you still got the Steelers. So I wouldn't even say it's unrealistic for the Ravens to go 0-4, but I'm thinking more of the 1-3, 2-2 spot for the Ravens, which wouldn't be a great ending for them. And I think next year, if they can get healthy, we've never seen so many players get hurt for the Ravens. If they can get healthy again next year, they've got the young pieces in Rashad Bateman and Devin Duvernay to put with Hollywood Brown and Mark Andrews, J.K. Dobbins. So I think if they can get healthy, and then that same for the defense as well. You got so many guys missing games that I think their biggest issue right now is just how many injured players they have.
I'm sticking with saying that the Ravens are going to win the Super Bowl next year, but certainly not this year. You said that the Ravens are going to be a 1-win in the playoffs team. I think that they're going to be a 1-win for the rest of the season type of team. at the absolute most. I think that they might have a chance to win against the Steelers. However, like you said, their next 4 games are the Packers, Bengals, Rams, and Steelers. I see at least 3 to 4 losses in those games. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs at all at a 9-8 record. Definitely not at an 8-9 record in the current state of the AFC. The Ravens have 17 players on IR this year. It is unbelievable how injured this team is. It only got worse when Marlon Humphrey, the starting cornerback for the Ravens, got injured. John Harbaugh earlier today said that Lamar Jackson will be back to play the Packers this Sunday, but if Lamar isn't back or gets more seriously injured, Tyler Huntley just won't be able to lead a broken team through the war zone of a schedule that the Baltimore Ravens have ahead of them. I have to agree with you that the Ravens aren't going to be able to turn around before the end of the season. I don't think they're even going to be able to turn it around before the end of the regular season to even bother to make the playoffs this year.
Yeah, I said the team is at most a 1-win playoff team, but yeah, I think you're right on as well that they are probably not gonna make the playoffs after the 8-5 start with a easier schedule than some teams. Now you get to the hardest part of your schedule with just a 1-game lead in the division. I think the Bengals or Browns will be able to win 1 or 2 more games than the Ravens will.
Let's wrap things up for this episode, shall we? So that way we can get back to watching the Rams and Cardinals game that we're recording in the middle of. Starting off with Thursday Night Football, it's the Kansas City Chiefs and the Los Angeles Chargers.
This game is going to have huge implications, and after what the Chiefs just did against the Raiders, I think their defense steps it up, especially when you don't even need to have that great of a defense with the weapons they have on offense. I'm going to take the Chiefs.
The Chiefs had a very slow start to the season, but I don't think they're going to be very slow as we approach the end of it. Definitely give me the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes on this one. That's going to be a very entertaining game, however, and it's definitely going to have a big implication on the playoffs. Let's talk about Saturday's games that we for some reason have this week. It's the Las Vegas Raiders and the Cleveland Browns.
Yep, get the college football time slots filled up with NFL now that we only have bowl games left over. In that first slot, I'm going to take the Cleveland Browns over the Raiders, as the Raiders seem to just get worse and worse every week that we see them. And I think it'll continue again against the Browns.
They've certainly been in a downward spiral since all the controversies earlier in the season, and I think that downward spiral is going to continue. Give me the Cleveland Browns on this one. Next up, we've got a very, very interesting game with playoff implications. It's the New England Patriots and the Indianapolis Colts.
Yep, this one's tough to predict. Patriots coming off their bye week, as well as the Colts coming off their bye week as well. I'm going to take the New England Patriots in this one. I'm going to take Mac Jones over Carson Wentz after the Patriots just went and beat the Bills, so I thought we're a really good team. I think they can go and beat the Colts and cement their spot at the top of the AFC East as well as at the top of the AFC.
I think I'm feeling an upset on this one. On the contrary, I think that this one's going to be a win for the Indianapolis Colts. Obviously, we've said that they're going to be a dark horse for the playoffs this year, but to get to the playoffs, they're definitely going to need to win big games like these, and I think the Colts have it in them to at least win this one this week. Give me the Indianapolis Colts on this one. Moving on to Sunday, it's the Carolina Panthers and the Buffalo Bills. I think this one's a pretty easy one, although the Bills did struggle against the New England Patriots the last time we saw them. Or did they play this week? I don't remember. It does not matter. Give me the Buffalo Bills on this one.
Yeah, the Bills are looking good. Cam Newton had to get benched once again for PJ Walker, and I think Panther struggles will continue again, and the Bills will come out victorious against the Panthers.
Who knows? Maybe the XFL greatest of all time will find a way to upset Josh Allen and the Bills. Next up, we've got the Arizona Cardinals and the Detroit Lions, not to be confused with the Denver Broncos. This one's a pretty easy one. It's got to be the Cardinals.
Yep, this might be one of the most lopsided games of the season, as the Arizona Cardinals are going to come into Detroit and absolutely crush the Detroit Lions, in my opinion.
Next up, we've got the New York Jets and the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins have been on an upward trend in the last half of the season. The Jets have been on a slightly upward trend, but certainly not enough of an upward trend. I think I'm going to have to pick the Miami Dolphins and that strong defense on this one.
Yeah, the Jets' upward trend is pointing towards years of an upward trend, as the Dolphins are looking at an upward trend of trying to sneak into the playoffs, and I think that'll show again this week as the Dolphins beat the Jets pretty easily at home.
Next up, we've got the Dallas Cowboys and the New York Giants, neither one of which is one of your favorite teams, that's for certain. But definitely give me the Dallas Cowboys on this one after a close win against the Washington football team last week. I don't think there's any doubt that they're going to beat the Giants of all teams.
Yeah, the Cowboys broke my heart this week, and I think they looked decent enough to beat the Giants, who have struggled all season. And I think the Cowboys are going to finally eliminate divisional championship hopes of the Washington football team as they beat the New York Giants.
Next up, we've got the Washington football team and the Philadelphia Eagles. The Washington football team seemed to have a lot of quarterback struggles last week as Taylor Heineke was taken out of the game. I think that's not going to be a great confidence booster for Heineke, and I think that the Eagles might take a few notes from what happened last week and get a dub in this one.
Yeah, but I think actually that the Washington football team played the worst half of football they played all season in the first half against the Cowboys, and then seemed to fix it in the second half, outscoring the Cowboys 20-3 in the second half. And I think that hot streak continues, and they keep it going against the Eagles, and they find a way to get the win and keep their playoff hopes alive.
Next up, we've got the Tennessee Titans and the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is a very good one, and it could potentially have some playoff implications. I think I'm going to have to go with the Tennessee Titans on this one, though that is a very hard choice to make.
I'm going to actually go with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think the Titans rely a lot on the run game, and I think the Steelers actually enjoy playing against a run-heavy team, and Najee Harris will take over against Deontay Foreman in the Titans' makeshift running back group as the Steelers win at Heinz Field against the Titans.
Next up, we've got the Houston Texans and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Certainly not one of the more interesting games this week. What are you thinking, Zach?
Yeah, we've talked about how bad the Jacksonville Jaguars are this week, and I think they're gonna embarrass themselves even more as they lose at home to the Houston Texans this week, after Davis Mills looked like a respectable quarterback in the game this week. So I think he got off to a great start against the Seahawks, and I think he could get off to an even better start and make a complete game against the Jags.
I have to agree with you. Obviously, we made some irrational decisions earlier in the season when the Houston Texans beat the Jags in Week 1. However, I think that the Houston Texans very much still have the talent to beat a now dysfunctional Jags team. So definitely give me the Texans on this one. Next up, we've got the Bengals and the Denver Broncos. Definitely give me the Cincinnati Bengals on this one.
Yeah, the Broncos were able to look good, and I think they bonded together a little bit after the loss of Demaryius Thomas. But I think this week the Bengals are the better team, and they're going to show it against the Broncos this week.
Next up, we've got the Falcons and the San Francisco 49ers. I'm going to have to take the Niners on this one.
Yep, hard to bet against the 49ers right now as they've been really hot the past couple weeks, and the Falcons have struggled all season. I think if Elijah Mitchell is back for the Niners, as well as Deebo Samuel, who's turned into a running back slowly week by week, that the Niners will come out on top against the Falcons.
Next up, it's the Seattle Seahawks and the LA Rams. Like we said, the Seahawks are on a downward trend and need to turn things around with some big changes in the offseason, but they're definitely not winning this game here against the LA Rams and Matthew Stafford.
Yeah, a big divisional matchup, but the Seahawks obviously the underdog, and I think they're the underdog for a reason, and that's why I'll be taking the Los Angeles Rams.
Next up, we've got the Green Bay Packers and the Baltimore Ravens. I think we both hinted at what we're going to answer for this one, but definitely give me the Packers on this one.
Yeah, the Packers have been great all season with Aaron Rodgers still playing through his toe injury, and whether you got Lamar Jackson or not, I'm going to take the Packers over the Ravens.
Next up, it's the New Orleans Saints and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, the Saints did pull off a pretty good, a decent game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers earlier this season, but I don't think they're going to be able to do it again. Definitely give me the Bucs on this one.
Yep, the Bucs have looked great, and I remember the Drew Brees Tom Brady matchup last season in prime time, but in this situation I'm gonna take the Tom Brady Buccaneers over the Taysom Hill New Orleans Saints.
Absolutely. And finally, wrapping it up, it's the Monday Night Football game between Minnesota Vikings and the Chicago Bears. I can't speak at all today.
Yeah, the Bears played about a good half against the Packers, but I think the Vikings are the more complete team and are going to show you exactly why when they play the Bears and come out with the win at Soldier Field.
I absolutely agree with you here. It's definitely going to be the Vikings on this one. The Bears definitely surprised me with how well they played for a half against the Green Bay Packers, but of course they couldn't finish it out, and so it's definitely got to be the Vikings on this one. And that is all we have time for. How are we feeling, Zach?
Feeling good. Crazy that we're to the point of Saturday night games. That seems to almost signal the end of the season most times, and doesn't feel real that we're almost at the end of the season. But I guess it's thankful that we get one more extra week in week 18 to watch a little bit of extra football. But yeah, we're getting to the point now where almost playoff time, and some teams only got 4 games left. I think this week was the first week in which teams actually were getting eliminated from playoff contention, even though we'd known that some of them weren't going to make it for a while. This last week is the first week where they were mathematically eliminated, certain teams.
It's certainly great to have gotten this far through the season. We got a podcast just about every week apart from our bye week, and I think we're going to try to get one every single week until the end of the season and after the end of the season. But until then, it's time for us to lock up and shut down.